Hello and welcome to my channel and welcome to episode 3 of Love Unsolved. You know, I was talking about this on Patreon the other day and I was saying how much I love a Storytime series because it gives me the opportunity to, number one, do something consistently on my channel. I love a series, period, but also number two, it gives me the opportunity to tell stories within a theme instead of just sort of trauma dumping on the audience, which I have been guilty of before. And I really love this series because it allows me to, like I said, I'm in a phase of my life right now where I'm doing a lot of reflecting. And this series allows me to reflect on the extreme nuances and like ins and outs and just the general weird nature that has been my romantic life. I have not had a straightforward love, marriage, baby carriage arc yet. Or just love marriage yet. There's always been weird things that have happened. This series, of course, is the more so weird and not as traumatic, but there's definitely been those too. So I've had fun doing these. I don't know if they're super popular on the channel, but I've had fun. And actually, I had an idea, and I don't know what you guys think about this, but back in February, I was doing a All About Love series. You know, we're sensing a theme. But I was doing an All About Love series and I asked you for your input and I got so much input that I was like, oh man, I've got to save all of this for one episode. And I don't know if I'm going to have time to like stick to my pattern and put all that in the episode. And so I didn't end up doing it the way I wanted to do it. And I kind of just told you guys, hey, I've gotten a lot of feedback. If you want to see more of this, go read the comments. Like there's a lot of things. And what I had asked for at the time was, can anybody share a good story that they have? It was feedback that came from the questions for women who have been loved. That was it. Or people who have been loved. Or I think I said women specifically. Might have. But anyway, the comment section was beautiful. And my goal was to share some of my favorite love stories, like pop culture love stories, and my favorite love stories in the comments. And there were so many of them that the video could have been 2 hours long, honestly. But instead it was like 30 minutes long because it was a choice. I was overwhelmed by all the choices. So what I want to do now that in this vein of Love Unsolved is, I know I'm not the only one out there with weird situations when it comes to their love life. I know we've all had maybe a bad date, maybe a time we got ghosted, or a time we had to ghost because we didn't understand what somebody had going on, and more deeply. I know for every person that got that straight love, marriage, baby carriage arc, there are hundreds of thousands of us who didn't get that. And within that, there's so many people who have unsolved love mysteries. And so I was very excited that I can, serve up all of mine at 7:30 on Sundays during this October 2025. But I thought to myself, what if I also shared some of yours? And so very much so in the vein of what I did with the All About Love series when I said, hey, here's an email you can send your your love stories to. I was thinking of doing that with Love Unsolved. Like if you have a story that is, and it can literally, guys, it can range from the simple, like the ones I'm sharing, I went off on a man on a dating app and he decided she's not the one for me and peacefully ghosted out or peacefully exited the situation. Or, I could have had a Aisha Curry and Steph Curry-esque love connection in high school. Well, if we would have stayed together, who knows what would have happened. But anyway, could have had that, but he never actually spoke real words to me. So nothing happened. Or the one I'm going to tell tonight about a man who went missing when he told me he rode his bike to Tijuana, or he was going bike riding to Tijuana for a day, or whatever he had going on. So it could be simple stuff like that, or it can be more in-depth stuff, more mysterious stuff, more along the lines of it can be real. Now, one thing I will say is I'm going to draw the line at anything that may be an active investigation. Oh yeah, I want to hear your stories, but let's keep it cute, right? Anything that could be an active investigation, anything that would require me to possibly put an allegation on somebody that was not a founded allegation. I will never forget, there was this girl over on TikTok a couple years ago, and her whole thing was doing dating story times or like love gone wrong, story times, that kind of thing. And when people would send her stuff, she would just take it as Bible. She would just take it as law. And people would send her pictures with full names, faces exposed of people that they knew or people that they were dealing with. And she would just say, okay, you're telling the truth. And she would use full names, full pictures, everything. She would publish those things on her TikTok page. And I'm scrolling through one day and I see somebody I know. And the story that's being told, I'm like, that ain't what, wait a minute, I don't know about that. And that's what, you know, is crazy about telling stories or doing whatever online in general is if you're gonna take it there with your full chest, you're gonna use people's full government name and their face and their family's names. You need to make sure you have that 100% true. And I knew that person was lying. Like I was I just happened to come across this and it was people that I knew. And I was like, oh no. So I reached out to the person that I knew and I said, hey, they're telling your business on a random TikTok page. They reached out. I pieced out after that. I was like, I'm out of it. You know, I just wanted to send you the information and let you know that this is happening. And that's extremely messy. So that's too rich for my blood. That's also illegal. Like you can't, I mean, there are legalities, whatever. I don't want to take it there, right? So obviously, like I would tell your stories and we would not use names and we would not use any real pictures and we would not use ongoing investigations, you know, that are real serious. But I'm sure there's others of you out there who have unsolved mysteries when it comes to love. And at the end of this series, I'm going to do what I did back in February. I'm going to provide an email. If you want to send one to me, I think I'll take about 2 weeks or so to gather things up and resume this series back in November. And if you want to send me something, if you have gone through something and you're like, man, what happened with that? That was so weird. It can literally be as simple as it was just a weird date and I was really confused. Go ahead, send it to me, and I will dramatize it, punch it up, and tell it in a Love Unsolved. That is if you guys want to do that. If you just want this to be a Halloween thing and just to like let it go, then that's fine too. I will remind you again on the last episode, and if I don't get anything, I won't make a big deal out of it. I'll just let this one, I'll just let this idea leave and come up with something else, possibly another Storytime series, because I really do like doing that. Let's go ahead and get to today's mystery.
A young woman ready to settle down, and a young man eager to build an emotional connection. Swiped right toward happily ever after, but when communication suddenly stopped, so did their love story. What happened? Find out in this episode of Love Unsolved what happened on the bike ride to Tijuana.
The year was 2019. When this happened, it was 2019. And in my last episode of Love Unsolved, I talked about how crazy my dating life in LA really was. Like prior to this series, I've told y'all all about the extreme traumatic incidents. So you know about, well, if you were here years ago or you're a patron and you've seen, you know about the guy who ended up being someone that several women had written warnings about online. It was a white man who only dated black women because apparently people said he liked to target us and take our money, run up our credit cards, have people pay for his motorcycles, his license. It was real deep. And I found out all of this while he was in my house with his head on my lap in the early stages of the pandemic. This man would not give me his full name, but then I remember that he sent me some things that he had done and his name was in the corner. So I looked that up. I just happened to Google it while we were watching because I felt like something was wrong, like something wasn't right. And I found legal, people had lawsuits against him. I found blogs with women detailing their abuse by this man. Like it was like a warning, like you need to get away from him. It was almost like he was Dirty John. If you know about that series that was on Lifetime and you know about that real story, that's who I felt I was dealing with. And he was the very last guy I ever dealt with in LA. I talked about that a couple years ago. I just told you about it now. That's basically the gist of the story. I told you about the men who were hiding addictions. I told you about the men who were hiding whole other lives. I've told you about those things. But in my last episode, I talked about how there were actually some kind of sweet guys as well. LA was not all, and this is something I'm realizing 5 years later, after I've had the chance to unpack and I guess rebuild new neural pathways in my mind. I'm realizing that Los Angeles was just really, when it comes down to it, too rich for my blood. Okay. When it comes to career opportunities, everything I had wanted and hoped would happen actually happened. I need to do another story about that. You guys would probably slap me in the mouth if you knew the things that I was like, oh, we'll wait. Let's wait on that. Just to give you an idea, I had always wanted to work. Never mind. I'm not going to go into it because that could be a whole nother 30 minutes. But everything that was promised to me, you know how people always say, like, I know what God's promises are for my life. People say that, right? Everything that was promised to me, everything that had been hinted at for years, everything that I had hoped for my entire adult life. I got to Los Angeles and it was like game, set, match. Here you go. And a lot of things were right in my lap. And honestly, I feel like if the pandemic hadn't happened and if that city hadn't turned me upside down and inside out, I would probably still be there working a lot of those leads. I would have taken a lot of those things on. But we did have the pandemic. That city did turn me inside out. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that I would experience extremely traumatic things when it would come to my dating life. And then I would also experience like an abundance of a new type of man that I hadn't expected. You know, I hadn't thought about him. I didn't know he was out there. And I would call him the bumbling everyman. You know what I mean? He's not necessarily the guy who's like the leader of his of the pack in his friend group. He's not the guy that you sit back and you're like, oh, one day when I get married, my husband will be. Like, he's not that person. He's not doing incredibly well in his career. You know, he's not somebody that, you know, you're like, oh, he's the head executive. He's this, he's that. He might be struggling financially. He might not know all the best places to go. He might not be super social. He might not have had a relationship in a really long time. But some of them were very sweet and they were very intentional and they were very excited about me. And I'll tell you, at the time, I was kind of a bitch, especially in 2017, my first like summer in LA. Whoa. Whoa. I was a kid in a candy store for the very first time, trying to play games that most people play when they're like in college. But I was out there playing. I was playing. And the same goes for 2018. I still wanted to play. But when I got to 2019, I was ready to get serious. And that was like the alignment with me in LA that was always kind of off. When I was ready to like really settle down and take on bigger opportunities, they were gone. You know, so for example, career-wise, in 2020, I would have been ready to go and finally take on these. But we had the pandemic. The timing wasn't right. And the same thing went for dating. When I was finally ready, when I was like, okay, I want to be serious, for real, I got the absolute worst dudes, the worst. So that is a truth. But again, it's also a truth that there were some really great ones. And I messed up some connections, sometimes by being completely unhinged. And sometimes, like in this story, by just communicating in ways that gave a man an impression of me that wasn't true at all. Before we get into the story even more, I want to also talk about my interracial dating history. I think I've talked about it a little bit. I talked about it, when I first got on the internet. I was like, listen, you don't need to tell me that black love is a lie. Or there was this video out at the time. This woman had this channel and it was called The False Promise of Black Love. And it went viral and people were sending it to me. And I was like, you don't need to send this to me because I've never been a person who's been like, black love or no love. Like, that's not been me. And I know a lot of black women specifically are like that, but that was never me. The way I grew up, I am a graduate of Black girls in white suburbs. So somebody made a video the other day and they were like, them black boys in those schools would be like Uncle Ruckus. And if you don't know who Uncle Ruckus is, watch an episode of the Boondocks. But just very like, we don't want no dark skin. We don't want no black woman. Like just very intense about it. And it actually took me reading Black Skin, White Masks by Frantz Fanon in college to understand like the mindset behind that. But because I grew up that way, I did not ever think, by the time I got out of high school, I did not plan on having a black husband because I just felt like I was not their type. I felt like black women weren't their type. Now, of course, that's not true. That's very extreme. But the way I grew up, that's how I felt. I felt like every man would look at me the way that the self-hating colorist boys that I grew up with were looking at black women. And that just was not the truth at all. And it took me a really long time to understand that. So probably too long. But anyway, as a result, though, because I was like, okay, this is how they treat me. I'm done. By the time I was 18, I was like, I'm done. I planned on my husband or my partner being white. And most of the men that I would meet that I would have crushes on, that I would develop attraction to, people knew we had something for each other, whether or not anything actually developed, they were white. And I met them through work and through school because bars and clubs were not my thing. Parties were not my thing. I had gone through high school. I was never invited to parties. I was in college and I only went to parties if my friends were throwing them or if me and my roommates were throwing them. We used to throw fun parties, but they weren't like sexy parties. You wouldn't see, well, I guess they were, that's another story. But my point is that I didn't really meet like guys, people to date at parties or in clubs and things like that. So that was not where I would find people. I would find them at work or at school. And a lot of times in those places, they would be white. And, those weren't necessarily easy connections. It would usually end up being something like we were really good friends with weird, intense sexual tension. That's what would happen. Or sometimes they would try and take it further. And I would say no, because they were so much more advanced than I was. And I was also very, very Christian at the time. And so I knew if I date this man, that will mean bye-bye to waiting until I'm married to have sex because I know the way he gets down. So yeah, and I'm teetering, right? I'm not a good soldier at this time. I was probably like 20 years old. By the time I was about 19, 20, I was like, what they talking about over? What would it be so bad? I was already contemplating a life after, religious-based abstinence. And so sometimes white men would just be like too advanced. Sometimes I would know that they had a woman in their corner that fit them more socially, and maybe I didn't fit them as much. But yeah, there wasn't a lot of easy coming together when it was with me and white men. But that doesn't mean the attractions weren't there. That doesn't mean the connections weren't built. And a lot of my early romantic experiences came from connecting with white guys. Until I was around, I don't know how old I was, maybe 20, 21. And a group of men that had always been there in my life, but kind of been in the background, started to push forward. And these were Latinos. So like I said, I grew up in predominantly white environments. And I was aware that there were other races in the world. Obviously, I had friends of all races growing up, Indian friends, Asian friends, Latina friends. My best friend in middle school was a Mexican girl. It was the first time that I ever received tamales for Christmas Eve. And what is so embarrassing about me and tamales? I tried to eat those things with the shells on for years. It took me getting corrected when I went to LA. They were like, girl, what are you doing? Because I would always say, I don't like tamales. Too hard. Because what would happen is when I was younger, they would give me the bag of tamales and we would take them and my mom would eat them all. So I didn't really like try. And when I would try them, I guess I don't know. But it took me a long time to eat tamales correctly. But anyway, had a very good close friend in middle school who was Mexican. I was always aware, that Latino people were around, but I kind of viewed life through just a black and white lens, literally. And then when I got to college, I I started noticing that when I would be asked out with some decorum, it would be a guy who was Latino. As early as, I want to say 19, 20 years old, I started noticing that if you were looking to date and you were a black woman looking to date interracially, that Latino men presented some things that I really respected. First off, it was tradition. They were not playing around as far as being in traditional relationships. This stretching things out, this, oh, I don't care, like, you do what you want, I'm single, you're single. No, they wanted to lock it down. We're together. Very serious. The other thing is that there wasn't so much explaining of otherness, at least when I was in Texas, because a lot of them grew up in very diverse areas too. I know when I would date white men, it was a lot of, okay, well, yes, this is not my hair. No, this is it's a we or extension. Okay, so actually, that, like, a lot of conversations, a lot of talking, but when I was around Latinos and Latino men, I didn't have to do so much explaining of myself, and I liked that. And then, like I said, on to piggyback on that, I just wasn't seen as so much of an other in Texas, right? And in certain parts, I know there's a lot of racism, there's a lot of colorism in Latino communities, but I experienced a lot of warmth, a lot of acceptance, and when it came to the young men, they came correct. In fact, when it came to Latino men, especially in my 20s, I fumbled. I fumbled a lot because I would never be ready for the seriousness that they were bringing to the table. They were not playing never, not once. And I wasn't ready. The first guy that ever took me on a date, introduced me to his mom, he was the first for a lot of things. I thought, on the surface, that he was a white man. And then one day he said he like went out, he used to work in a field. He did oil and gas, or like something with oil or something. And he came back from a job and he was dark. And I was like, let's say his name was Josh. I was like, Josh, well, you're a little, what's going on? And he said, oh, I didn't tell you, I'm Mexican. My mom is Mexican. My dad is white. And I was like, oh, so, and that's something I realized, like, the other day. I was like, oh my God, I was first courted, taken out when we would go out, even after we broke up, because our attempt at a relationship was, I won't talk about that. That was real stressful, but, we were better friends than we were romantic partners. But whenever I hung out with him, I never paid for anything. He would take care of my friends. He had halitosis. I don't know what it is about me and men who can't brush their teeth. And you would think, well, Stephanie, maybe you attract what you are, but no, I don't. I don't have these issues. I don't know why they come and find me. But his breath was so bad that one time we were sitting at an IHOP and one of my friends was sitting across and he was treating us. And she was like, when he would talk, and I was aware of it. And so I was taking the menu and I was like smacking his face with the menu while he was talking. And he goes, can you cut that out? And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. And I didn't want to say, don't open your mouth again, because you're about to strip this wooden table of all its varnish. We're about to have to come in here and repaint the walls because your breath is causing the paint to peel off the walls and the wood to peel off the tables. Your breath stinks. Like, I couldn't say that to him, so I just had to put my menu down and turn my face away. And after we ate, my friend was like, listen, I'm happy you got, somebody that want to take you out a little bit, but your boy's breath. So yes, we didn't last long romantically, but I will always remember the way that he treated me, because he was the first guy who ever asked me out, whoever showed up in a really specific way. And he happened to also be Latino, even though I didn't know that when we first connected. So I have definitely a past when it comes to me and Latino men, and I didn't realize that really for a long time until I got in my 30s, and it was like it got turned up a notch. There was a full year where all I met were Michaels who were Mexican. And there would always be something to where like we couldn't come together. It was actually 2015 to 2016, my last like full adult year in Houston before I moved to LA. All I met were Mexican Michaels, and I would meet them everywhere. One time my car broke down. He was my tow truck driver. One time I met one on Tinder, my one experience trying to use Tinder when I was in Houston. One I met at a martini lounge. One, like I would meet them and I thought, oh, this must be some sort of a sign. And so even though I never successfully joined forces romantically with a Latino man, whether it was because there were other things going on in our lives and we couldn't bring it together. He had halitosis that one time, or I just wasn't mature enough for what they were trying to do. That happened a couple of times. It has to be said that there were always a population that I knew was there for me as a woman to explore. And if I wanted to be serious and I wanted to be in a relationship, and as I got older, I said to myself, he's probably going to be Latino. I think a icing on the cake for this was in the summer of 2016, like literally, I don't know, a month before I moved to LA, some friends and I went to a casino in Louisiana, and we were out like at the pool all day, just hanging out. And we met these two friends, and they were from Texas. These two guys, they happened to be Mexican. And I start talking to one of them, and immediately he takes control of the situation. He's like, okay, what are you guys drinking? Blah, 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 immediately. So you know how I will say, oh, when I go out, nobody offers me a drink, nobody. It's because it's been about 10 years since I've been in situations like this. And this is one of the only times that this has ever happened to this extent. Anyway, so he bought our drinks. He took care of us the whole day. And then we were like, okay, well, we're hungry and it's time to go. So he said, okay, well, I know we're driving in different directions, but we want to take you guys out to eat, him and his friend. And so they took us to a Buffalo Wild Wings, and we ordered, and they paid for everything for everybody. And as we're leaving, he and I had a weird moment. He was really friendly and really nice, but he had a girlfriend. And also he was kind of something, we weren't, but the point was that he had come into the situation, took care of us, took care of me and all my friends, even though I was the one he was talking to most of the day. And it was a really interesting thing. As we were leaving out, a black man was walking in by himself, and he stared us down because it was me and two other friends. We were all black. And then we were with these two Latino guys. And he stared us down like we punched his mama or something. And I just had to laugh to myself because I was like, I had hung out with one of those friends, one of my other black friends, that whole summer. And I had never been offered anything. They had turned their butts up at me, and we were hanging out in predominantly black spaces. So I was like, who are you looking at? I can't help who actually wants to take care of me. I cannot help that, But anyway, I really took all of that as a sign that when I was ready to like settle down and really be with somebody, he would probably be Latino. What I will say though is that I think I aged out of that demographic. So when this happened, I was like 31 years old. But by the time, by now, everybody's married. Or I actually met one earlier this year on a dating app, and he was divorced, but only by like 6 months. He had 3 kids. Like when I say very serious, very intentional, they go ahead and get that thing started. His kids were like 16, if I was to, I don't know. My point is that was a group of people in a population that I took for granted as a young woman. And whenever they would show up in my life, they would always show up extremely seriously. So I go to LA. And when I get to LA, obviously, LA is something like 57% Hispanic, okay? Hispanic Latino, 57%. And it's all different from all different countries, all different nationalities. Like it's definitely, and you are going to get your ass whooped if you say, oh, look, there's a whole bunch of Mexicans here. and it's a whole bunch of people from El Salvador, or it's a whole bunch of people from Peru, or it's a whole bunch of people from so let's see where else. I met just all different kinds of nationalities of Hispanic, of Latino people, just from everywhere. And I taught a lot of them. They were different nationalities, different groups of people, and I dated a lot of them via the dating apps. And the dating situation when they were a Latino man, for the most part, was very similar to what I experienced being in Texas. The only difference I would say is that, nope. I know I said in Texas a lot before, because I did notice a difference between Texas experiences versus Houston experiences. I did notice a difference. I did hear more racism in LA from Latino communities, but that wasn't all the time. You know what I'm saying? So I just think in Texas, I just didn't hear it, right? I think a lot of things that I'm not going to say right now, but let's just say I only had like maybe one negative experience, but everything else was really, really positive. And for the most part, again, they were very serious and very intentional. And I either wouldn't be interested in what they wanted to do. Like one guy was like, if we get along as well as we do on the phone and in these FaceTime calls in person, then I'm going to marry you. Another guy was like, oh, so you want children? Because I was like 33, 34, 32 around this time, and he was like, well, I have a son, but I don't have a daughter yet. Very, very intentional. I'm ready for a relationship. I don't, just very eager, very intentional, very on purpose. Everything was like on purpose. We're going to go here. We're going to do this. Very willing to lead. I fumbled like a mother. I was not used to that. Cause even like back when I was in Texas, I would meet people, but it was so sporadic. It would be like, years will go by and nothing, and then all of a sudden, what do you mean you want to take me and my friends out to eat? What do you mean? Like it was very sporadic, but all of a sudden it was a lot, and they were all available via these dating apps. And so I definitely fumbled. I didn't take things as seriously as I could have, because I wasn't ready for that yet. And then of course when I was ready, they weren't there. But the point is that whenever I would match with a man who happened to be Latino, I felt like as a woman, okay, I'm about to be treated right. That was my experience. Now, I'm going to say be treated right. I just generally mean he's going to take initiative. He's going to be a planner. He's going to take being in a commitment seriously. He's not going to play with me. He's not going to try and do this let's be casual bullshit. I have never experienced, except for one time, but I had never experienced a Latino man saying, let's go 50-50. One time I did. One time, and he thought he could get away with that because he had a big, I'm just being real. It was quite the sight, okay, and that's why he thought he could get away with some tomfoolery. He got away with it for a little bit, but that's all right because he didn't get away with it for long. Anyway, most of the time though, I'm not dealing with that. I'm dealing with people who want to date, who are excited about relationships, so. It was definitely exciting to me when I would be swiping and I would come across a person who happened to be Latino, and we would get a real conversation going and set up a date and see what we could get started. So that was the mindset that I was in 2019 when I was on dating apps again after a wild 2017 and a wilder 2018. And I got to January 2019 and I was like, okay, I'm really ready. Like, if you want to go ahead and bring him, universe, I've learned my lesson. I've had my fun. I'm ready to sit down and be somebody's woman. And so I get on my dating apps. I open them up. I've got Tinder. I've got Bumble, where nothing ever used to happen. And sometimes. My life is literally could be called There Will Be Exceptions, right? That's what the story of my life could be. Anyway, I get on Bumble, I get on Tinder, I get on OkCupid. I'm on all of them, just seeing like what we can see. And I come across this guy on Tinder, and we'll call him Rodrigo. And immediately Rodrigo stuck out to me because I felt like he was handsome. I have a real thing for that darker skin, good black beard, thick black hair, but it's like cut short, but it's not shaved. I love that look. Think, what is his name? Gosh, I can't remember. I'll put him up here. Or this guy from that show Good Girls when it was on. I love this. I just think that this look is so handsome. And so he looked like that, and I was like, okay. And you know, I'm swiping back and forth, and I swipe on him, and we match. And from the beginning of the time that we matched, Rodrigo was, as I hoped he would be. You know, I'm matching on a Latino man. I know they don't play. They're gonna want to get a date together. They're gonna want to talk about the future. They're gonna want to lock in. So I matched on him, and I was ready for the games to begin. Let's see. Let's start 2019 off on a good note. So we start talking, and Rodrigo's interesting to me because he is someone that I hate these people now, but back then I didn't know any better. And it's somebody who wants to build a very deep emotional connection with you before actually meeting you off the app. So someone who wants to talk, maybe trade voice notes. At this time, I think voice notes were like a new thing. I had never really received them until Rodrigo started sending them. He wanted to trade pictures. He was sending me videos. And I remember he came into town. So Rodrigo actually lived in Tijuana, which I didn't realize how close Tijuana was to LA. I didn't know. But he lived there, and he ran a business with his dad. I'm not going to say what the business was, but he would come to LA for business. And I met him when I was still on break from school. I hadn't yet gone back to school yet. It was still Christmas break. Like, these were the early hours of 2019. Okay. So Rodrigo was in town in LA on business when we met, and he immediately locked in. Like I said, started sending, we're talking, and he's like, well, you can text me if you want. He sends me his number. I text him, and he's like, hey, what's up? And then he starts sending voice notes, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. This is fun. I'll respond this way. And then he starts sending videos of himself doing activities at the store, at the DMV. He's sending me videos. What's up, girl? Or what's up, love? Or what's up, honey? Boo. Some kind of pet name. I don't remember what it was. Hey, I'm here. Just, gosh, this is a tough day, whatever. And I'm like, wow, he really wants to lock in and start building this like intimate connection that normally happens after a relationship has already started. I don't like that. Now that's a quick way to get unmatched, me move on, whatever. I cannot stand that. But some people do that. And back then it was a welcome thing because I hadn't dealt with a guy who actually wanted to lead with that emotional currency in a long time. Rodrigo was a Scorpio man, which I usually try and avoid like the plague. But I was welcoming someone who wanted to, again, build emotional connection after a year of air signs and fire signs. But I was soon to be tormented by an earth sign with an air Venus, if you know, you know. So I was excited, though, to have another water sign around. Somebody who wasn't afraid to build emotional intimacy. Somebody, like, now I'm suspicious of it, but back then I was welcoming it. And I was following into the routine too. I was like, look at us. We're sending each other videos. We're sending voice notes. Look at us. We probably only chatted for like 48 hours, but it honestly felt like 2 weeks because we were sending so much communication back and forth. And what's interesting though is that Rodrigo was not doing what I normally associated with Latino men as far as taking charge. Let's set a date. Let's meet in person. In my experience, they did not play about, okay, let's meet in person or let's set a date when they were, when even before, no, they were serious about let's set a date. Let's get something. Like I never had to worry about, me doing the work, me having to do the research, me having to, no, they would get that together. And that being said, Rodrigo wasn't doing that. I think, I just said we talked for maybe 48 hours, but the length of time that or the amount of times that he tried to access me, I thought for sure he would be like, oh, I can't wait to meet you in person. Here's what I want to do. And after about 2 days of voice notes and videos, I was like, well, let me ask this man what he want to do. Like, do you actually want to get together in person and maybe get lunch, or, how long are you going to be in town? Because this seemed a little ridiculous now. And he stalled, gave me the runaround. He did not want to set a date. Not only that, but he started telling me like what he didn't do, which was a little annoying, because it's like, can't you tell me this over coffee or over dinner or over, whatever. But he starts saying like, well, I don't really drink, or I don't do this, or I don't do that. And so it put me in the mindset of, okay, what can we do? Why am I working so hard? We just got to know each other. If you're coming in with all this list of I don'ts, then you should be like, okay, well, I could meet you here. Like when I have people in my life who are vegans, who are vegetarians, who don't drink, they normally lead with like an activity that they want to do, because they know going in that they're the ones with the special considerations. But it was like Rodrigo knew he had these, but he didn't actually want to do anything about it. He was using them as roadblocks instead of a way to like get to know each other. And normally when a man was dragging like that, because that's something I absolutely did not have to deal with back in those days. Like, I'm telling you, you can match with somebody, talk to him for 24 hours, talk to him for a couple, whatever, and then get a date. Like, dating apps were for dates. It was not for wasting time, getting a pen pal, blah, blah, blah. These men were ready to meet you somewhere, right? And again, that may or may not be the vibe now that I would want. But back then I was ready for it, because I was like, I'm trying to pack in all these years of non-dating experience that I've had. I'm trying to get all this out of the way. I want to go to restaurants. I want to do activities. I want to see what's out there, because I had never really dated before this time in my life. I had been on dates, but I had never really participated in the process of dating. So I was used to people being on dating apps for that reason. So when Rodrigo was throwing all these roadblocks, I was confused. I also want to provide a little bit more of a backstory for me and where I was kind of physically at this time. So because 2018 and 2017 had been so wild, my body was starting to show signs of wear and tear. In 2018 alone, I had to go to the hospital because there was a bug that crawled in my ear, an earwig. Crawled in my ear in the middle of the night. I had to go to the hospital, and they had to pour a solution in there to get that flushed out. And so that happened. I got pneumonia that year. In around my birthday, I celebrated my 34th birthday with surviving pneumonia. I had an inhaler that was like this big, and most of my life I had been jealous of kids with asthma and kids with glasses and kids who got to wear casts. I know I'm not the only one who was crazy in that way, but I finally had an inhaler. I finally had one, and I would like take it with me everywhere, even when I didn't need it. Anyway, but I had a really bad lower left lung pneumonia that year. There was just a lot of reasons why I was in the doctor in 2018. Like, it was to the point where when I would show up at the doctor's office, they would say, "Oh, happy to see you again." Well, no, I mean, we enjoy your company, but it means something else is wrong with you. So never mind. I went to the doctor a lot because there were so many new experiences outside of dating. There was experiences that were very negative around like my living situations. LA is very expensive. I did not want a roommate. So it was hard to find a place that was solid, that I could live in, that was comfortable for me. There was job situations, financial, friendship dynamics. That was the year of going out to Joshua Tree with the girl that got drunk and walked buck naked in the room, and we only got 1 hour of sleep. And that story's on my channel. It's on YouTube. So 2018, there was a lot going on. There was so much going on, and my body towards the end of 2018 was starting to show some wear and tear. Mainly, I had stopped going number 2. I had stopped. I would not go. And I was the kind of person that was always very regular. In fact, I grew up in my childhood with somebody in my family who had Crohn's disease. And so my parents, particularly my father, would always talk to me about how grateful I should be for a regular digestive system. He would always be like, "Wow, you're such a pretty girl and you're so regular." That's what my dad would say to me. So I grew up kind of being very, very proud of that. I didn't have issues. I wasn't one of those people that didn't go for days on end. I was very regular. So all of a sudden I get to the end of 2018. I'm not regular. I'm not going. There's days that have passed. Nothing's happening. And I told my dad about this, and he was like, not my baby. Oh no. Okay, well, this is what I drink, because my dad actually is not a very regular. He does go for, enough about our systems. But the point is he was like, I usually have those issues. I know you don't, but this is what I drink when I'm having those issues. And he sent me this green diet detox tea. I think it might have been the same stuff that was in those flat tummy teas that were really popular back in the 2010s, but it was just in a different box. And he mailed it to me. And you know my dad is worried about you if he actually mails something. That is not his thing. But he mailed me my own box of tea. And so I was like, okay. And I think New Year's Eve 2018, I might have celebrated it by drinking some of that tea. Like I might have started drinking that and trying to see if that was going to get the show on the road. And it did. But I think they should put a warning on that box, or I eventually was told by my doctor to stop taking it when I ended up in the emergency room. That's another story. But if you take it too often, it can definitely cause some issues. For me, it would cause these really, really bad cramps that would send me running to the bathroom. So this is going on around the same time that I'm dealing with Rodrigo. So one time he had sent me a video of him from the DMV, and I was like, oh, I want to respond, and I feel so comfortable with him. Why did I record a video while I was on the toilet? He could not see. I cropped it out so it just looked like I was in the bathroom. But I had been on the toilet for so often that day. I was like, oh, I want to respond, but I'm on the toilet. I know, I'll just film it, and, he can see. He won't see the background. So he couldn't tell where I was, but I knew where I was. And in retrospect, that's insane. But I wasn't always operating on all, cylinders at that time. And I wanted to show him that I could be just as vulnerable and available. So I'm recording videos of me sitting on the toilet, fighting the effects of this green detox tea. Anyway, I'm going through that weekend, the same weekend that we matched. I'm going through hell with my body. And also, I had a friend of mine who I hadn't seen in a little while, because she'd been seeing a guy that she met online, and they were very busy. And she was like, girl, I haven't told you about him yet. We be, and I need to talk to you about what's happened with this man. And so I want to come visit you. So I had moved into this apartment that was in a very dangerous neighborhood that they were trying to gentrify, but it was very dangerous. And part of it being so dangerous was that you really couldn't park your car anywhere. There was no parking, and there was no parking in my unit either. So you had to, when somebody came over, they could either, they could take their chances and park around the unit. One guy came to see me one time. His car got towed. He had to pay $400, and he came back. So, all right. He was in it, and a liar the entire time. He should have just stayed with his towed car. But what I would usually tell people to do is park down the street at the Wendy's or the gas station, and I will come get you. And then when you're ready to go home, I'll take you home. I don't want you parking here. I don't want your car to be towed, because they would be towing cars a lot, because there wasn't a lot of protected, safe parking in that area. Anyway, so one day, the same weekend that I'm dealing with Rodrigo, she comes over, and she wants to tell me all about her new man and their activities. And so I leave the house, and I go meet her at the gas station. I drive her to my place. I take her up. I'm like, this is my new spot in this really unfortunate neighborhood. And she's like, oh, it is. Okay, girl. Well, I'm a little tired. This weekend. I was like, yeah, I get it. Y'all be I get it. Okay. She was like, oh, let me just lay down. I'm going to tell you all about him, girl, but I need to take me a little nap. Just a little nap. So she laid down on my couch, and that baby took a 2-hour nap. And while she was taking her nap, Rodrigo sends me a voice note, and he's saying good night or something like that. And I don't want to ruin her nap, because I can tell, oh girl, whoever she's been dealing with has been turning her out. So she needs her rest. and we'll probably talk when she wakes up. And I don't have the time right now. I don't want to disturb her. So I get up and I go to the next room. And I send him a voice note and I'm like, hey, my friend is here and they just fell asleep. And I'll have to contact you again when they leave, but it was good to hear from you today. And I hope everything goes well tomorrow. Because Rodrigo had told me he was going back to Tijuana and they were going to be riding bikes. That was one thing that he really liked to do. He liked to ride bikes. So I was like, I hope everything goes well tomorrow and we'll talk. And hopefully when you're back in LA, we can actually get together. And so I sent him that note. And then I went back out in the living room. I sat out there, waited for my friend to wake up. That baby slept for 2 hours. When she woke up, she was like, I got to go home. I got work tomorrow. So she really just came over to my house to take a nap, take a break from this man that was taking all her energy. And she went back home. So when she went back home, I sent him another message. I said, hey, I just wanted to message you again. My friend left. They were asleep the whole time. They left. And I hope to talk to you tomorrow. Again, I hope you have fun, on your activities. I hope you're safe on your bike ride. I sent that message to him and I waited for his response. Just anything okay, a whatever. That they had that technology back then. All right. And normally he would do that. But this time nothing came. And so I was like, oh, well, maybe he's just busy. I would go through phases of being absolutely unhinged, like a man not responding to me. And I would just turn this mother out. And then I would have phases where somebody didn't respond and I was like, let's not go to that place, Stephanie. He's probably just busy. It's the end of the night. It's fine. The next day, I think we were actually starting for the spring semester at work. And so, that was a busy weekend. Connected with Rodrigo. My friend came over, took a nap. I'm fighting for my life on the toilet. And the next Monday, I got to go back to work. So I get up, I go to work. I think it's an in-service day for teachers or something. I think the kids hadn't yet come. And I'm filling in my little coworkers because I used to have this little hive of coworkers that we would talk to and compare our dating stories and our experiences. Or some people would talk about their marriages or whatever. And mostly we would just talk about the kids. But I had a really great coworker friendship environment at my last job. I always had great coworker. People are like, I don't make friends with my coworkers. I'm like, most of my friends as an adult came from work. But anyway, so I go to work. I'm telling people about him. I'm like, yeah, he's really cool. One thing though, he has not responded to me in a couple hours. And normally Rodrigo was the good morning. How are you? Checking in during the day, sending a video, but he hasn't done any of that. And I'm just, it's a weird day, but maybe it's, I don't know, maybe he's in the middle of riding his bikes. I don't know what's going on. So I'll leave it alone. And I think I want to say the whole day started to pass by. I want to say the entire day, the entire work day. I went home and I noticed he still hadn't responded. And I start to get worried about him at this point because at the same time that this was going on, there was a writer in Hollywood who had gone to Tijuana and had gone missing. People were like, where is he? So I was beginning to think that something had happened to Rodrigo in Tijuana on this bike ride. So I decided to send him a text and just say, hey, just checking in on you. Haven't heard from you today. I hope you're having a good time. I hope you're staying safe. And this time my text doesn't go through. So this is probably what I have a PhD in at this moment. And I'm so happy that I have this appointed time to tell you. If you have an iPhone and you have been blocked, when you send a message, you will not see delivered. Okay? You will not see it. If you have been blocked on an iPhone, you can send a message. It can be blue all day. If they blocked you, it will not say delivered. If you haven't been blocked, you will see the message has been delivered. If they don't answer and it was delivered, you know they didn't want to talk to you. But if you send that message, that blue message, and it never says delivered, you've been blocked. Something may have happened with that person's service. But in my experience, if something did happen with their service, the message will eventually go through or it might turn green and they'll receive it when they turn their phone back on, when their service gets, or after a certain amount of time, it will say delivered eventually. But if they blocked you, that thing gonna stay blue and it is never going to ever say delivered, ever. And at this point in my life, the spring of 2019, I had definitely been blocked by some folks and I had done some blocking. Okay. So I knew when I sent my message and it didn't say delivered, that something was happening with me and Rodrigo. Like he in the 3 days that I had known him, he had not gone the full day without saying anything. And then when I sent him a message, the message didn't go through. So maybe I was blocked, or maybe he was somewhere suffering in Tijuana like this comedy writer that nobody could find at the time. So I was stressed out. I was like, what has happened to this man who has only been in my life for 3 days, but what is going on? However, I also knew that there was a way to test whether or not it was his service or I was really blocked. And another one of my PhD talking points, another thing from my my dissertation that I learned whilst online dating in LA. When you send a message and you have been blocked and you have an iPhone, it won't say delivered. A way to test if that lack of delivery has to do with just their service or the fact that they don't want to talk to you is to change on your iPhone, go to settings and change how you send your messages. Start a new message change with that person. So you can switch to a different number if you have a different number on that phone, or, and this is what has happened to me and what I have done. So, I mean, men have sent me messages from their emails and I've been like, oh, you can get around it. Okay. And then I have done that. Did you block me? And so that's what I did in this moment. I changed where I send my messages from my phone number to my email. And I started a new conversation with him. And I said, hey, I'm just checking to make sure you actually still have service. I went to text you earlier. You didn't respond. I'm worried about you. But if this message goes through, I will know that I was blocked and it wasn't the fact that like you didn't have service or something like that. So I send him a message with my email. The message goes through. So I try again with my regular phone number. The message doesn't go through. And I say, this man blocked me. Now, again, like I said earlier, I had been blocked before at this point in time, and I had blocked other people. And normally the situations were very, very clear. It was like, bro, you thought you was going to get with that? Excuse me. It was like, bro, you thought you was going to get away with that? Or, sis, I'm talking to myself, you know what? You know why that man blocked you. Keep it moving. But in this situation, I could not figure out what I had done wrong. So I sent another message from my email, last one. And I said, hey, now I know I've been blocked. I don't know what I did wrong. Feel free to text me if you want. I'm confused. And I never heard from Rodrigo again. In the meantime, though, the comedian, the writer that went missing in Tijuana, he was found dead. And I began to think that maybe that's what happened. But then I was like, well, Stephanie, why would you think that when your messages were going through? You know they could go through. He just made the decision not to hear from you. So, I don't know. But I also opened up about what happened to another friend of mine who didn't live in LA. We were just talking and catching up. And I said, yeah, I met this guy and I was kind of excited about him and we were getting real close. And I, told him that I was going to bed. My friend was over and my friend was sleeping and I would call him back when they woke up and left. And she was like, what did you say to him? And I said, oh, I told him my friend came over and they were sleeping. She goes, did you say they or did you say she? And I was like, I think I said they. And she goes, girl, he thought you had a man at that house. And all of a sudden, everything started to come together. The fact that he was talking to me so intensely for so many days, and then he tried to call me or tried to send me a voice note, whatever, to say goodnight. And I was like, oh, I can't talk. A friend is over and they're sleeping. I don't know why I chose to use non-binary pronouns in that moment, but I did. And according to my friend, that was the reason why this man pulled all the way back. He believed I had another man in my life who was coming over to the house, spending the night. And as a result, he was like, I'm not dealing with her anymore. And he didn't do what some people do, over explain, over communicate, whatever. He just simply blocked me and kept going. Now, I will never know for sure if that's what happened because, like I said, I never heard from Rodrigo again. But my friend who I spoke to was so sure. She was like, girl, that man thought you had somebody else at that house. Why would you tell him somebody else was over there? Because she was. But the real question is, why didn't I use the word she? Why did I say my friend? Why did I say they? Why did I make it vague and confusing? We will never know. Again, normally when I would match with or deal with a man who was Latino, it did not matter what nationality he was. He could be from Peru. He could be from El Salvador. He could be from Guatemala. He could be from Mexico. He could be, I don't know. Let's see, who else was in the mix at that time? Dominican and, what did he say? Dominican and Mexican. Normally, they were very serious about, let's set up a date. Let's meet. This is what I want. Especially as they got to around their late 20s, around that age, they wasn't playing at all. And I had experienced it when I was in my 20s, and I experienced it again when I got to my 30s. And a lot of the time, I had to bow out because I wasn't ready to be as serious as they were ready for in that moment. I got the feeling that for some of them, it was like, whatever, you'll do, you come on in, right? But in the times that I really did like someone, I was looking forward to that pace. I liked that pace. And I think I liked Rodrigo. But in retrospect, his communication was ass. He could have asked me, hey, was a guy there? He could have asked. Also, the inability or the lack of excitement over actually setting up a date versus how eager he was to send video. It was like he was more comfortable with the idea of communicating with somebody and the idea of being closely connected, but not as comfortable with really doing the work. Regardless, I will never know because I don't know what actually happened when Rodrigo went on the bike ride in Tijuana. All I know is that was the end of our little communication. And the rest of January 2019 would be very, very eventful when it came to my dating life. But that was the end of Rodrigo. All right. That is the end of this episode of Love Unsolved. And I guess I kind of solved this one. Well, my friend solved it for me. You may think the same thing happened. I don't know, whatever your theories might be. I have one more episode coming on Halloween. And that one I think you all might like. A lot of these episodes have to deal with men that I actually never ended up meeting under really weird circumstances. I'm seeing that as a theme throughout the series. Anyway, one more episode, but that is the end of this one. And as always, thank you for watching.